right now is my guest, Dr. Sam Ikoku, who is the founder and the chief executive officer of Paystar Limited. He's also a productivity coach. Consultant, yes, productivity consultant. Good morning, Dr. Ikoku. Welcome to the program. Long time no see. You don't take where we see.
You don't take.
You don't take.
Well, good morning to you,
Good
Nancy.
morning.
Great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Let's get started. I don't know if you watched that report that we aired earlier, and I think we should start from that because sometimes when I discuss here on the program or when I'm talking numbers, when I'm talking statistics, economy, and all of that, it seems so esoteric. But I always tell people it's not esoteric because the numbers that I speak on a daily basis, what I say on a daily basis, are human beings, are human faces, are human conditions. And when our reporter went to do that story, we took it. In fact, when I listened to that woman saying because of inflation, because of the hardship, she has withdrawn one of her children out of school. My cameraman was just telling me here before you came in that there's a family that sells in front of his shop, and in fact, there's a family that sells ugu. And they had to, the girl, one of the daughters, will go to school, come back and sell ugu for them. But now that they've withdrawn the girl from school, about 12, 13 years. And these are the stories. And why am I saying this? Why am I starting off with this? Because we're looking at inflation. We're looking at productivity. We're looking at human capital. And that was why when I was coming up with this topic, this was what was in my mind. Okay. Why I said we're going to discuss this morning. So talk to me about the interplay between these three: inflation, human capital, and productivity. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Nancy. First and foremost, it's very encouraging to see the passion with which you're speaking about it.
Thank you.
Because a lot of people have become desensitized. I mean, when a problem persists for so long, it's actually a great thing to be able to be numb. Otherwise, how do you cope? You know. However, the leaders and those who are in a position to do something about it must remain able to interface with people and understand their suffering, because they have the leverage to help make things happen. Now, inflation, as we know it, is the increase of prices over a certain period of time. Now, the key thing about inflation is that aspect of it that says the increase of prices. What's causing the increase in prices? It doesn't solve the problem, but it's good and helps to understand it so people can get involved in the debate. Many things can lead to inflationary prices. It could be, in the case of Nigeria, for example, the price of oil. We produce nothing, literally. So all of us, whether we go to the abokies or we go to the bank to ask for foreign exchange or not, personally, are involved in the purchase of foreign exchange because the traders are buying things on our behalf. So we're all involved. So some people say, oh, I never buy dollars. You do.
Exactly. I've never looked at it that way. Thank you for bringing that out.
Yeah.
Indirectly, we are all involved.
We're all involved in buying dollars. But the real danger of the inflation we have in Nigeria is what I will call hedging one's bets. I mean, things are increasing so quickly that even if your business, take a service business, is able to absorb current prices for a while, you don't, because you also have to buy food. You also have to pay for transportation. You also have to do all kinds of things. And then we have this very dangerous part of our economy, especially in the area of daily paid workers and petty traders, where they become what I would call, they try to game the system. You know, if things are increasing, then I should just keep increasing my prices. You know, and the sum total of that is we've entered into double-digit inflations. We are in trouble because this sort of inflation is very difficult to address. You can't address it just basically on fiscal monetary policies because it's got to do with the fear of the people about their standard of living, about their quality of life. And so government has to really be able to do that. Now, you talked about a family that had to put a child out of school. The truth is, that's very painful indeed. But it's part of the coping mechanisms that we have to do right now. You have 6 children, you can't pay school fees for all of them. You have to begin to think about new ways to make things happen. You see graduates coming out of school, they don't get work for a couple of years, so they can't help the family. Your dream as a parent, saying, look, if Junior graduates, he will help me with his sister and all that, is all shattered. And so we have to begin to look in the area of human capital development at our economy and begin to get people who are fit for purpose. All right? We have to look at the educational system and change. Not everybody needs to be a professor or an engineer. Some people need to do something quickly and get artisanal work and start beginning to earn money for the family and so on and so forth. Again, I know a lot of people won't like when I say this, but those who are pursuing the degrees, what are they getting anyway? You see the Vox Pox graduates who can't explain what NYC is, and so on and so forth. So we've got to change all of that and say, look, how can we make our people more useful for this moment? How can we give them a bit more power themselves? Because everybody seems to be waiting on government. We're waiting for this administration, we're waiting for that administration, and we're regularly throwing away chunks of our lives, 4 years, 8 years, just waiting for government. It's time to take back that power and say, look, how do we make things work?
But okay, let me take it from what you've just said. It's time to take back that power. How do you expect the powerless to take back power?
Yeah, that's a very good question. But you see, look, the truth of the matter is, I would probably go out today, and an average meal will probably be 15,000, 20,000 naira. That will feed a family of 6.
An average meal for you?
Yeah, if you go to a restaurant
Okay,
today,
okay.
yeah, probably feed a family of 6 or 7 for a couple of days, all right? There is a certain amount of resilience capacity built in based on one's self-perception. One of the things that taking off the prices for fuel did for us was it suddenly made us realize we were living wasteful lives. Before the fuel subsidy was removed, I could get up in the morning and say, where am I going today? Oh, I'll visit Nancy. Oh, yeah. Then I'll visit John. Then I'll visit whoever. And immediately they took out the subsidy. And I'll say, well, I'm not going anywhere today until everybody is lined up on my route.
But isn't that also a dysfunction? Because if you take a look at it, an economy should also be able to empower its people to spend, to consume. The US, for example, is a nation that also consumes. They have their own problem too, and all of that. But what I'm trying to say is that an economy should be able to fuel the citizens to aspire to do anything they want to do. Because if you take a look at it, if you're not able to visit me and I'm not able to visit you, it takes off some kind of, that social fabric at the end of it begins to dwindle.
Yeah.
Somehow, if you also, measure it, I'm not which course will be able to do this well. But I think you understand what I'm trying to say in terms of, okay, you even see the advent of phone, for example, the advent of social media. Some people don't even have that human interaction anymore. Sometimes when people say hello, I'm like, they ask of me again, even me. I'll be like, no, but I see you every day. You see me every day, do you know if I'm fine? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Understand.
But we see you every day. I see you. So things like that. So if you're saying, okay, the government took off this, something must give.
Yes.
Is that something given that I'm talking about?
I'm talking about the space between government action and something giving. And I'm talking about adaptation.
Okay.
We have to adapt for a while. I'll give you a good example.
But adaptation now becomes a normalcy.
Yes, evolution is happening. See, look, when we first started with the phones, it was something that when you had a phone, you put it conspicuously so everybody should know you've arrived. Today, nobody can function without a phone. Even though we cannot afford to have everybody go to school now because of the way things are, but everybody has access to the internet, which is the best learning tool. So people still want to and have to improve themselves using the resources that they have available. Whether we like it or not, we're evolving as people, as systems, as societies. And so these adjustments have to be made. Now, if you look at our educational system, as cheap as it is compared to other places in the world, I mean, someone was telling me the other day, her tuition is 60,000 and so on. That's pretty cheap. But no matter how cheap
How
it
about
is,
the output
that's
of this
exactly
cheap
it. Of
product?
course, it's
The output is nothing to write home about,
yeah, I
at least
agree.
for now.
I agree.
If you tell a graduate to write a letter, just tell a graduate to write a letter, you begin to see what I'm saying.
That's where we come into the human capital
Capital.
development issue of it. What can government do other than just throwing money at the system that can help the quality of the educational system and those who come through it to be fit for purpose? I keep using that expression, fit for purpose. Where we are today is not where we were 20 years ago. So we need to be fit for purpose today. Take, for example, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
We have new developments upcoming now. Artificial intelligence, for example, I mean, it's a tired phrase, everybody's talking about it. But are we ready? Are we ready for that? Do we even know what it means? What are we including in the school curriculum? I have a young son who's going for common entrance. The book they're using for common entrance is the 25th edition of the book. And it still has grammatical errors from the first edition.
It's not been corrected?
No.
Over 25
Go out now and buy it. So here's the question, what's really going on? So I think that we should prioritize the quality of our education. It's not how high you rise, but how good you are. When I was younger, there were people who went to primary school, and they could run as permanent secretaries in this country. You had good diction, they could think, critical thinking, and so on and so forth. Today, we've got youth corpers who honestly should just go straight back to school. So there's a lot of problems there, all right? The productivity on its own, there are two aspects to productivity. The first one is to maximize what you currently have and then to extend that. And we're failing on both fronts. So what do we do about that?
Okay, you've said a lot of things, and let me try to, unbundle a few. Let's take a look at these economically disadvantaged families. You talked earlier on about sometimes we should not look at government all the time. You should be able to say what you want to do with yourself. And that was why I asked you earlier, what can actually the powerless do for that woman now that has taken a child or children out of school? This is a woman that is living on less than $1 a day. So what do you expect her to do? Do you want her to go in front of Aso Rock and go and protest? So what targeted interventions, for example, do you believe that can alleviate the impact on educational as well as professional outcomes? Because for her right now, taking a child out of school, even for many that have taken their children out of school, I'm thinking even for those children, that's where my mind is going. Who is thinking for them? I had at the Nigeria Economic Summit group, at the Nigeria Economic Summit that was held, was it last month? I had the privilege to anchor a session, child-centered development, where I had the Minister of Health and Coordinator of the Economy, Coordinator for Social Welfare, and the Minister of Education. And I asked them the same question. And I said, if you go around Abuja, if you drive around, you see disadvantaged children. You see their parents by their side sending them to beg. Are you guys that are ministers seeing these people and who is thinking for them? These are the things that you guys should be doing. And I spoke to them directly that these are the things you people should be doing. So what kind of interventions do you expect for those families?
Yeah.
Do you understand? Beyond
understand.
even these palliatives, I don't want to hear.
Well, the truth is there should be some sort of social safety net. But the social safety net should be a trampoline. It's not a place you rest. You bounce in there for a while, the system holds you up, then you go back out. So you've got to have a program running. No country can afford to keep all of its citizens on welfare. That's one. But I think the issue, another tired phrase is strong institutions. When we came up with this issue of microfinance banks, the whole idea was to get money to these people.
Exactly, to get the poor out.
And when you hear central banks saying we are shutting down 200 microfinance banks, 300 microfinance banks, you wonder what changed. Was it the policy that changed? Was it supervision of the banks that changed? Was it the kind of people who got licenses that changed? Was it their practices that changed? We have palliatives. You don't like to hear that,
No, no,
but
no,
I've
no.
never met a single Nigerian who's benefited from that. I hope there are people who have, but I haven't met any of them. And so again, we are hoping that things will get better. As you well probably know, I am apolitical. I mean, I just want to
Yeah.
see, quality of life for the people first, then standard of living next. And as long as anyone can put that in place, I think we'll have it. My mother brought up 8 kids. Apart from 2 passed away, I think almost everybody else ended up having a PhD. What was she doing? She was a seamstress.
Your mom was a seamstress.
Yes, she was a seamstress. She went to a school of fashion in London. She came back. She knew the value of education. She sweated. My mother had workers who would come in at 5 in the morning and they would work until 10 o'clock at night. And she never held back, giving us the best of everything. So I see that as a model. Um, what makes people really find it hard to cope is when they see themselves struggling and almost nothing is coming in. Then they see the next guy enter into political office, and in 6 months, he's got 10 billion in his account. Something doesn't feel right. It's like 2 different societies in one place. So, but if we return to those values where we value hard work, we're a meritocratic society, we pursue justice, equality, people will not just only cope, they would become far more creative, far more willing to apply themselves. And I think that's critically the discussions that we should have.
You talked about NYSC earlier
Mm.
on, and what's coming to my mind is the quality of the graduates now, because we're also talking about human
Mm.
capital development. These graduates are expected to get into corporate organizations,
Mm.
government for work and all of that. How do you think that businesses right now, or even companies, or even government, because
Mm.
government also
Yeah.
recruits both at the federal, state, and local government, how can these categories of businesses adjust their recruitment?
Mm.
How can they also train? How can they come up with development strategies to accommodate these individuals? Because in a rising inflationary trend right now, many companies are also shutting down.
Mm.
We have to say that someone in that report did say that, was it the previous report, that even for late coming, some people have been sacked. Yes.
Yeah. True. When you're running in a tight environment, financial environment like that, you would look for every excuse to let people go. But if you're letting people go, it means you didn't really need them in the first place, or you were not getting what you wanted. My advice to most companies today is in your budget, include something reasonable for retraining new staff. There used to be a time where people say, look, we'll just take students who studied abroad. They're better than the Nigerian ones. Today, there's no difference. So if you don't set aside a budget and say, I'm going to retrain them, let's assume from the university they've learned how to think critically and so on and solve problems, hopefully. Then I'm going to train them on what I really want them to do in this organization. If you don't have that budget, you're going to be losing a lot more money through incompetence, through a lack of motivation, through what we call eye service, and so on and so forth. And they're sitting down with your internet and they're looking for new jobs. They only work when you come around. So how do we get this kind of people to have the values and the competence needed to run businesses, especially now with the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and the competition is there? One first step is for employers to train people. I see the rise of what we call the corporate university coming into Nigeria, where you take people in, knowing that you're sucking in quite a lot of muck as well. And then you put them through a grinder and make them fit for purpose. That's the word again, fit for purpose.
How about organizations that have actually done that? And at the end of the day, because I also hear that and I see that, after training and retraining, it's as if you train and retrain and they leave. And you undergo those cycles again. Take a look at even what's happening in the banking sector or even in the tech space. You train, you retrain, they leave or they jackpot. And you get new people and you also, that vicious cycle never stops.
Yeah, the training is not the only thing that's involved. What's the culture, or what's the corporate culture of your company? Why should anybody work with you? Why should anybody want to stay? How do you treat your staff? What's your leadership like? after we've gone past survival mode, we don't stay in a place because of the money. We stay in a place because of the prospects we see. We don't want to work for companies. We want to be part of a crusade. So if you're not putting all of those elements together, people won't stay. Just because you retrain them didn't mean they entered into freewheeling into a prison. Make work useful. Survey we did in our company, most Sundays, people are a little bit depressed in the evenings. And what's the direct reason? Work tomorrow.
On Monday.
So if you have a studio like this and you value your desks, your cameras, and everything, these are assets. You value them. These assets depreciate from the day you get them out of their boxes. The only asset that appreciates are your people. The people here, the experiences they've acquired. Now, you can tag all of these things and put security people around your studio, but your best asset lives here every evening. These are your people. Your job as a leader is to make them want to come back the next day. And there, a lot of employers are lacking.
Can you now, give me a nexus around inflation? Now that we see rising inflation, 27.33% according to MBS just a few days ago, with productivity. Let's take a look at that and how you're a productivity consultant and how companies can adjust. Because what we're seeing right now is that because the cost of food, which everybody eats, it's also so much, the impact is even so much on the poor. I heard someone was telling me that day that people will come to the market now and tell even the meat seller, cut meat 100 naira for me. Is that bad? The meat they don't even have access to. Eggs, which we used to buy before, pot cannot even access it. Crayfish cannot access it. So what do you even give to a child to fulfill the protein needs of the child? So how do you balance this in the sense that as a productivity consultant, and I also suppose that you also speak to HRs in companies and all of that, if the companies do not even have the wherewithal to even increase salaries at this time, and you also need productivity in your company or in your business for you to be able to stay afloat, how do you balance that out?
Well, it's a tough act, but it has to be one that is literally a boardroom decision. I know companies, for example, that now cater for staff in the company. At least they assure that you have one great meal a day. They pay for that because they can pay in bulk, they can get it done. And the people who are trying to into catering business, and you can have all of those kind of balances. Now, I think if we don't do something about inflation pretty soon, we're going to go back to the days of essential commodities. Because look, if the people are not healthy, every other conversation is moot. So if we may get to essential commodities, I hope not, because it's like traveling back maybe 30 years. But the truth of the matter is, government doesn't keep its promises. That makes it pretty hard. We've talked about minimum wage for a long time. I mean, how many people are getting minimum wage? The states say, oh, we can't pay salaries, and it's probably true. But then we see them spending a lot of money on security and on fuel and on vehicles. So nobody knows really how to address this issue. However, on an individual, take government, for example. The latest thing about the performance management system, it's awesome. It's brilliant if it is implemented. The head of service says we have a new performance management system. It requires you to have a long-term plan, separate from the government's long-term, medium-term plan, a plan for your ministry, for example. And then it requires you to retrain your people to make them fit for purpose. Now, and then develop new job descriptions for them. This is a year old now. How many have done it? But government being the largest employer, if we could get these people to perform a lot better than they've been doing today, we will have those strong institutions we're looking for, and we'll finally be on our way. Everything else is a band-aid. Everything else is a band-aid. It's a difficult time. I am going through difficulties because a lot of people depend, we have an informal social security system. A lot of people depend on you for things. Christmas is coming.
Exactly.
The tears have started, the long texts. Nigerians can really write you texts that grab at your heart. They've started coming. But we must all survive the season together. And it's not easy for anybody.
how do you, as a productivity consultant, I'm coming back to that, how do you, speak to employees at this time? And okay, we've talked about employers earlier, where you talked about, what they can do to, to help their staff. How do you speak to employees at this time? What kind of engagement would you have with employees to increase overall job satisfaction within this inflationary period? Because almost everyone is so irritant. When you speak with them, or a lot is happening in the workplace. What strategies would you speak to my viewers about to maintain morale in these difficult times?
Well, first and foremost, I think the leaders of any organization, whether it's a 2-man team or a 20,000-man team, must get off their pedestal and sit with the people and say, look, I know times are tough. But in the history of this company, for example, we've been through tough times before, and we're going to go through this again. The leader must also show through clear examples that they're taking sacrifices on board themselves. I mean, you can't tell me tighten your belt and then you're buying 10 new Prado Jeeps. Something doesn't work there. You have to let people see that sometimes, and this is where the difficult choice is, we hire people for sentimental reasons and we can't keep them when things get tough. Okay? Things are good, you just take everybody on board. And then when things get tough, you have the tough job of letting them go. And nobody remembers you helped them at that time. Everybody now says, I served this man, and now he's letting me go. So I think the critical thing is for us to move towards creating a high-performance environment, which means leadership must be there, the tools to get the job done must be there, there must be a clear plan of action for the company, there must be responsibilities, people should own their jobs, people should have skin in the game. People should be, and believe this or not, nothing motivates people like knowing that they are being fairly appraised. That pushes them. But again, like I said when we started, people should be part of a crusade and not part of a company. If your company is not making sense, you don't have any reason to hang around any longer than you should. But these times will pass, Nancy. These difficult times will pass. The question is, did we learn anything?
Now, these times will pass to what? Because from history, it seems that bad times always pass to worse times, and we are in worse times now. That it shouldn't go to worst times. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
I understand what you're saying.
Yes, because during the Obasanjo days, of course, we saw a bit of improvement. That's actually when we started seeing this economic transformation, moved to late Yaradua days, then during Jonathan's days, oh no, the economy was bad. Oh no, we were growing at that time, even at 7 to 8%. Yeah. But it was a jobless growth. I here was also speaking about it then, that we had economic growth that were not producing jobs and even quality jobs. President Buhari came and said, okay, the things fell apart and the center cannot hold. And it was worse times at that time. Now, President Tinubu has come, removing petrol subsidy, foreign exchange crisis, a whole lot is happening. People are so disenchanted. So pass from what to what, So tough times will pass to what?
Yes.
Because history is telling us otherwise. Economic history, at least, is telling us otherwise.
But do you realize that some of the good times we have are because we're eating tomorrow's fruits?
Yeah, I realize
And we've been doing that in Nigeria for a long time. We're just where there's nothing else to use right now. And this time must be dealt with, otherwise there'll be no real growth. I don't want to bore your viewers with economic history, but we had Germany after the Second World War. Yeah. Where you had to take barrel loads of cash to buy bread. Today, everybody dreams to buy a Mercedes or a BMW. It's from the same Germany. So, well, tough times never last, even though they seem like eternity when you're in them. The question is, what are we doing today to get us out of this tomorrow? We can solve today's problem because it started from a long time ago. But if we continue the way we did, we're going to stay here a little bit longer. I know, by the way, as bad as things are, I'm sure your great-grandmother will look at you today and say, she's doing well. So there are different aspects to it. When the pandemic came, for me, it was a great opportunity to reduce my staff without reducing productivity. So after the pandemic was over, we all learned how to work virtually. Everybody should adapt. Everybody should. Sometimes I meet some of my associates only when we are serving a client because we've learned how to still be productive without that expense of fuel to the office and running all of that and so on.
Okay, I'm being told we have to go now. And just in 30 seconds, with all that we've said, what is your human capital outlook for the country?
Right.
Because I don't know who is measuring this period. Yes, to say, because I wonder, I would like to see what will happen in the next 2 to 3 years in terms of out of school children, in terms of other indices. So what's your own outlook?
Have you been to the Ministry of Education?
Yeah, I have.
Why don't you check and see the kind of people that are there and you can project? Our curriculum needs to be changed.
The minister told me that then at the session at the NESG, said they were also working on.
The only time I saw something serious happen was when Ezekwesili was there. Immediately she left, like the usual thing. Everything was thrown out. Now, we have a God-given break. The fourth industrial revolution is here. Things have changed. If we don't get our kids to catch up now, we'll be locked into being third-class citizens for another 100 years. It's desperate.
I think we'll leave it at that for now. You know, things like this is just, but thank you very much for coming.